이제 도마를 한번 게 상황라 나루들이 쉬어이.
First of all, I would like to wish everyone good morning.
다들인데 고객님이 시외급 다디노네 고객님이 시외급이 인스다.
And so this morning we are in the discussion of the sufferings of samsara.
이걸 가시도 돼 뭐주는 됐어요. 인지결 뭐주는 됐어요. 이거리야 냐외 동해 시외 거리야 자기 안다르기 바르도 즈네서 차기 윤초시자 바바인스 다들 송요아래 안다르사데 유게레야 샬라소보 두세게 데 드레질레야 셰브레디냐 금 딜레야 자 안다르사데 시딩긴 제베 나로레 자 치 rabdun bawa tang ding do chigu dan jawe chemar lobar che sumba na xin gam dilia ja chig jaw jing a zamba ta chig jaw ji le ya ko ko men ro sambar de yare kai sana temata do de xiding yi long di wo temata do xiding yi long chang ye yin sa pa ji de ko ko men ro samba de yare 자기 안드레스야 돼. 다전에 상해 계획 나는 차와시베거든. 차완 추주규만 카를로베 코바츠바다. 랍자는 추주규만라 소바. 소베 빠고 민변의 시네. 부가고님의 인종을 숨바델라. 타르겐기 백하시가 나올라. 빠고 미바스 마고 미다미스 지도스 다디 파지 바바 민바남 시그니스 마고 미나미 규르고 맨로스 가라사는 바바도 미바 탐지 시샤와이나 부가메베 인두사네 부가군의 맨종 사데 메브찬도스 되네 대하다 코바스고 잠데 차와체 되네 텔레 탈네서 뭐래 되네 빠고 민바 탐지 시그니 부가군 맨종아데 아랍사 라도 차와 되네 지샤고 메로 섬르지제 되네 지중 제기 중빈신도 식사데 다디 디나로라 지중 제기 가시에 나로라 가지 짜레 제베 산제데 지중 제기 투버신도 최사데 시딩 자와단 제바 탁바 제주 나로라 지중 제기 중빈신도 식사데 데야레스 데님주산에 중빈사다 가라서 청부 제기 청부 청부 제자바 지중 제기 청부는 이측으로 그래서 제기 투버신 지중 제기 투버신도 최사데 지중 제기 중빈신도 최사라고 만들어서 가라서나 시딩게 잔제 당바 남라야 된den도 한现在的什么意思啊大家嘛长尾鸟的区别呢长尾鸟에게는 주부르제는 되어와도 쏘탐탐바다 어주세와도 기후세와도 우베다 개바다 빼마다 개바다 빼마 첨보다 개바고 대들이야 주부르제는 장계신 제 송수 Dida ne kana ne shena, Zambuling dini yawana, Yawa Chumbanam, Tekana, Neso. Tedaga Dungi Jishin Yonshena, Jan Jubi Yunzin, the Tumo temperature, Tambuni, Chawan, Mississippi, Lula Chubur Chon, Chubur Deva, Double Cuba de, Lungua, remain the Das. Sumbana Chawan, Mississippi, Jan Juale Dawa. Baba was Kangam, Tudu Gaban, Ubeda Cable. All at Hashi, Marshing, Kajum, Telelabra Cabane, Bemadar Cable. Shindu Marakun, Kajam, Telelabra Cabane, Bemadar Shirkable. Chiman Dissume, Lungua, remain the Dawa. Tedaga Sitchi to Jen, Jumdendegi, Teda Bezam the Galonta Pena, and Dini, you manga de Tilzang, Keju Drosi, Tiji Chuburkande, Tene, Lalashik, Loja, Jandesi, Tiri Chirpona, Galonta, Rimbatina, you manga de Tizang, Ke, Gejubutem, Maluba, also seven, you and a chain Yurgi, Chuburgin gave Simjan and say also Tuba, Namimao, Galonta, Chuburgin, you should sit out the Chubur Deva, Jigino. Shabane, Galonta, Pematar Keva, Nishu Chidawa, Teshindo. Pematar Keva, Chambojigino, she sonso. Probably Ingi Tate, Lord Unitambane, Tizan and Lojashi, Tijichun, Segi, Chuburjing, saying de Shengi Sen and Nishu Shabate, Tena Chuburjing, Tizan Kang, Chubur Devajing, Nishu, Sotam Damjing, Shivjao, Urjuseve, don't try gay, Gihu save, don't try the Turin, Ubetar Keva, Sa Chasum, the Buntaniso. Bematar Kebe, Chawa to the Sa Cha Shi, Bematar Chamber, Bema Chamber Kebe, Tizang, Timbum Charge, Tunjur Chani, the Chawa Chashi, Niziv Simjinawan, Mambom, Nisam, Jigam, Sosu Letagi. Truba Indi, Tedane, Nambe Cheratuma, Yoto, and the Nelang ever made Chu, the Rida Yangam Yisha, the Shanta, the Sawada, catch me in the net, Papa Mongol if you see what the Tenji the Yangam Jicho, Zumba, Gindu to see what the wood. Indeed, Seseling ever mevo. Something never doing a share sin to.
His Holiness first started by discussing some typographical errors in the Tibetan text, which are only really two of them apply here in the English text. To note them in brief. It says at one point that others are pressed between iron plates and a stream of blood flows forth. This is a misreading of the original text. It should most likely be under an iron pestle. Likewise, it says a few lines later, a few paragraphs later, some are cooked like rice soup. This is probably also a misreading of the text. It should probably be some are cooked like rice dumplings. Now, to continue with the text on the 8 cold hells. There are 8 types of cold hell: the Arbuddha or blister hell, the Nirarbuddha or burning blister hell, the Atata or shivering and teeth chattering hell, the Hahava or achu hell, the Huhuva or strong lamentation hell, the Utpala hell where the being's skin cracked like Utpala flower petals, the Padma hell where being's skin cracks like lotus petals, and the Mahapadma hell where the being's skin cracks like the petals of a great lotus. The treasury of Abhidharma says there are 8 other cold hells, blisters, and so forth. Where are these hells located? Below this Jambudvipa, next to the 8 great hot hells. What type of suffering do they experience? Their sufferings correspond to their names. In the first 2 being such intolerable cold that blisters cover their entire bodies. In the second one, it is so cold that the blisters burst. These names refer to the changing of physical conditions. The next 3 are named according to the sound made by those experiencing the unbearable cold. In the 6th one, the skin turns blue and cracks into 5 or 6 pieces like an Utpala flower petals. In the 7th, the blue turns to red and the body cracks into 10 or more pieces like lotus petals. In the 8th one, the color turns to a darker red and the body cracks into 100 or more pieces like the petals of a great lotus. The last 3 refer to the changing of physical conditions. What is their lifespan? The Exalted One explained only through this example. Bhikkhus. For example, suppose that in this Magadha there were a storehouse with an 80-bushel capacity that was filled with mustard seeds, and someone removed 1 seed every 100 years. Monks, in this way, completely emptying the mustard storehouse in Magadha, which holds 80 bushels, is much faster than reaching the end of the life of sentient beings who are born in the blister hell. Monks, In the life in the burning blister hill, it lasts 20 times longer than in the blister hill, and so forth. Monks, the cracked like a great lotus hell is 20 times longer than the cracked like a lotus hell. This is abbreviated by Vasubandhu in the treasury of Abhidharma. Every 100 years take one mustard seed from the storehouse. At the end, one lifespan of blister hell will have passed. The others are 20 times as long. Therefore, the lifespan for the blister hell is the emptying of one mustard storehouse. For the burning blister hell, 20. For the teeth-chattering hell, 400. For the achu hell, 8,000. For the strong lamentation hell, 160,000. For the cracked like an utpala hell, 3,200,000. For the cracked like a lotus hell, this is 64 million. And for the cracked like a great lotus hell, 1,280,000,000. The occasional hells. There can be many beings gathered together, or two, or a single one, as is created by the individual's karma. There are many diverse types of this hell, and their locations are indefinite. They may be in rivers, mountains, deserts, or other places underneath the earth or in the human realms, as was seen, for example, by the Venerable Arya Madgalyana. Likewise, this is also seen by Sangarachita in a dry, suffering land. Their lifespan is also indefinite. These are the explanations of the suffering of the sentient beings in the hell realms.
다 장외냐와 계획의 장전 세배급리야 라마 티난게 라마 망부지기 기후기 제리야 소탐탐바 기후기 제리야 소탐탐바 샤는 거레스 이내야 네 타긴 들리야 어축 문도 소탐담바 샤나요레 예중 탐제 나네 타게는 신 어축 문도 소탐담반데 어때 가랬잖아 아주 장외 년배급이야 어축 속에 담마진빙을 녀래야 가서 댐로르 소댐 다른 와데 카드 소댐로르 근데 이제 되게 구름난 신샤나 버지 타기엔 구름난 신샤나 먼저 보게 요소만에
Now, many lamas, when they teach the cold hells, give the order that first you have, that before you have the achu hell, you have, that you have the achu. That after the shivering hell, you have the achu hell. But actually, the order in the jewel ornament of liberation is different. First, you have the teeth chattering hell, or the chattering teeth hell, and then you have the achu hell. And this order is also the order that you see in many Indian texts. You have the teeth chattering. You have the achu hell. You have the
teeth chattering hell.
Yeah, the teeth chattering hell first, and then you have the achu hell. And this is a good order, because the reason is when you get cold, first your teeth start chattering, and then after that you start sneezing.
다드네 타겐 백하시에 나놀라 창이 예바 빼마터 칠 개바사 빼마 첨부터 개바사들라 되네 빼마터 칠 개바사들 지도스 빼마 따르 체르 개바사데 디 바지 빼마 첨부 따르 개바스데스 저 고사레 섬선으로 다들 차디 아래 데네 장애기 체세시에 걸라 빼마 첨부 따르 개백이 장애기 체세시에 걸리야 야 장애 개바 동주차니데 차와 차시스 그래바데 Nordos, Tongshur Chani, the Chawa Cha, yes, you go those.
Likewise, in describing the eighth of the cold hells here, the Mahapadma, or the cracked like a great lotus hell, there are some editions of the jewel ornament where it says that it's greatly cracked like a lotus, but actually it should be the other way around, as it is in this English translation, the Mahapadma, or cracked like a great lotus flower. Also, in describing the lifespans for the 8 cold hells, in some editions it reads that the lifespan of the 8th, the cracked like a great lotus hell, is 1,220,000,000, but it should read 1,280,000,000.
이달에는 이달게 신지 델레트베 이다고 대달 가는 내시 이다게 신지 저빌링 오 바스 나게 제버는 여도 트베 이다는 양함지 셔라서 방에 매매 내서 트베 이달에는 손데 세금을 치 드바이에 난가 드바이에 다 세금을 드바이에 다 동해 진용시는 이다 준주진 가지네 하이베다 보에 냠수 용어 세금을 치 드바이에는 세금을 나라 통하는 신기 고버톤의 서동거 와메 나가 드바이에는 신기 민가냐 랑가 사와 동으로 민유바드 지게도 가지가는 컵기 미자 도리 견습 제베니 미자 기능을 보고 좀 최초도 내가 말아서 제순서 세공을 집어예발아 니 매지 팀와전 진진사와 달라 당분의 서버의 통화점이 쓰버린 교로 니반의 치사의 진통화다랑 그 샤제에서 대라야 양감지 쳐서 주신기 나와 제어를 통화다 보이 이다게 체 지시 톱제는 민남 나와지 가면 이다는 인샤지이나 된다와 당 로르집에 롱압제 톱 되더냐 이다는 다와 니샤 경합제 송소 둔들리에는 강망의更시的更逆的강매의 시오 니다 가는 내세나 추다 탕的나태 주의다 이는 대한 내기 자원의 자수 첨부인 대다 동의 진용신 과제기 동의 세세기 동의 찔리직사 동의로 대라 당번의 미완의 기부 둔둔 남대 지게도 와메신다 도발라버도 자도 적긴다 베답도 그 송소 니번에 리달라서바 남대 지게도 카지 무디 배다 루바타 차다 바베시의 치원 유세송 수번에 배실 치기야소를 내버는데 지게도 세수 동소 강법사시에 송소 둔주 세치시톱지는 예밤에데 유린식이 바르기 개발을 토바야 유에 제대로야 둔주는 초른 개발시에 송소 년도 동에 시에스 년도 동에라 숨디 매 동에다 남이기 동에다 하이 동에 될 밀어 동에 제외의 지게도 내주고 돌아 대신에 겨와야 동에라 가와야 동에 나와야 동에 치와야 동에 누구보다 차와야 동에 미두보다 차와야 동에라 강대버서도 많이봐야 동에 예바송가와야 동에라 제 송소
The hungry ghost realms. The classifications are Yama, the king of hungry ghosts, and the scattered hungry ghosts. Where are they located? Yama, the king of hungry ghosts, is 500 leagues underneath Jambudvipa. The scattered hungry ghosts have indefinite locations, such as dry places and so forth. There are 3 types of scattered hungry ghosts: those with the outer obscurations to eating and drinking, those with the inner obscurations, and those who have the general obscurations to eating and drinking. What type of suffering do they experience? The hungry ghosts who have miracle powers experience something like the enjoyments of gods. Those who have the outer obscurations to eating, drinking, see food and drink as pus and blood. They perceive others as guarding the food, preventing them from eating and drinking. Those who have inner obscurations have no ability to eat or drink, even though others do not prevent them. It is said, some suffer from hunger, their bellies are like mountains, and their mouths are as small as the eyes and needles. They have no ability to search for even a small amount of unclean food. Those who have the general obscurations to eating and drinking are in 2 groups, the fire garland and the filth eater. For the first, just by eating and drinking, their stomachs are burned. For those in the second group, eat excrement, drink urine, or eat their own flesh, as seen by Nawachewari in the dry desert. How long is the life of a hungry ghost? 1 month in a human realm equals 1 day for the hungry ghosts. 30 such days is 1 month, and 12 months make 1 year. In their terms, they live 500 years. Thus, the treasury of Abhidharma says, the hungry ghosts live month-long days, 500 years. In the animal realm, the classification is 4-fold: those who have many legs, 4 legs, 2 legs, and those who are without legs. Where are they located? Oceans, plains, or forests. For most of them, the ocean is the place where they abide. What type of suffering do they experience? The suffering of being used, the suffering of slaughter, the suffering of being eaten by one another. The first is accorded to the domestic animals under the power of humans. As it is said, powerless they are tortured, hands, feet, whips, and iron hooks enslave them. The second suffering is accorded to wild animals. As is stated, some die for pearls, wood, bone, blood, meat, and skin. The third suffering is accorded to the majority who abide in the big oceans. As it is said, they eat whatever falls into their mouths. What is the lifespan of the animals? This is indefinite. The longest lives one intermediate eon. Among the animals, the longest lifespan is one immediate eon at the most. There are explanations of the sufferings of the lower realms. The sufferings of the higher realms are categorized into three types: the suffering of the human beings, the suffering of demigods, and the suffering of gods. The human realm. There are 8 different sufferings in the human realm. The Sutra of Entering the Womb says birth is also a suffering, old age is also a suffering, sickness is also suffering, death is also suffering. Separation from loved ones is also suffering. Meeting with those who are not dear is also suffering. Finding what we desire is suffering, and the pain of protecting what we already have is also suffering.
야, 다드네 델레야 드니 미 동에 계순베 걸려야 동에 개바데 여바 순가 동에 이노스 다드네 순아레 이나야 고응은 죽은 도 응어다 대창백이 계숑 나올래야 동에 개바 델레야 녀월렘비 풍부 동에 순아레 드네 인두산 중세 미디움을 붙이도 수요한데 아래 다와나 녀월렘비 풍부 동에디 마 동에 대 동에 당부 걸려 시스미도 대 차려야 여바 순가 동에디 가르주에 nemba menro samrabsi tia pena robin kama lashilege 동해계 기치라 땜바 사 디나나 가르송어서나 여바 순가에 동해디 지여바 드네 인두사다 드네 토나스 코멘로스 거웅의 중도 나놀래야 동해계바디 여바 순가에 동해디 마임바 동해 녀를렘 풍부 녀를렘 풍부 동해 와사데 소나 유스레
Now here in describing the 8th type of suffering, here it is presented as the pain of protecting what we already have. However, in the actual text of the Sutra of Entering the Womb, it does not say this. In the actual Sanskrit text or the Indian text, what it reads is that it is the suffering of the aggregates of grasping. And so here, the suffering of the aggregates of grasping has already been explained in the discussion of the first suffering, the composite suffering of formation. And so it seems that here this has been the pain of protecting what we already have has been substituted for it. And this is found in some other texts. For example, in Kamalashila's teaching on the specifics of the 8 sufferings, he mentions the suffering of protecting what we already have. And so, but it's important to remember in the actual sutra, it does not say the pain of protecting what we already have, but instead it says the pain of the aggregates of grasping.
대라 깨와네 시엔탐지기 자와 이라 대야 깨네실리 깨어르스니 배정안에 깨오 대왕도 제나 다 버스바 받는 애도 주그러야 동엔 되더라야 돼 파르디스 받은 줄이던 데만 남가를 주시 라이미 이신 라이미지도 깨네 타르 뭐 통은 대 레이왕 로베 나와시 차르디 배는 롱치 볼라와 차르치 보바다 롱치 볼라와 차르치 보바다 남뮤바다 교만 다자죠 즉수로 잡아도 주의도 샤웨 레상에 지다와시는 양다바 뭐이 두시 준조는 교대 다네 셈에 가는 조건냐마다 감바즈베 나는 저거냐마다 질은 저거냐마다 자이 집으로 주고냐마다 로메진도 주고냐마다 자선도 줄었냐마다 나게 나도 줄었냐마다 직배부가는 줄었냐마다 송메스도 줄어 냠도 삼바 제대로 삼바다 파마 치고 줘봐 다른 분들 통한 된도 대한 소남 체레사와 걔네 전부 집어넣기는 세매 하나 깜빡 벌어서 통은 데려줘 소남 린도 사바도 걔네 린도 집어넣기는 자이 집을서 통은 데려줘 소남 마사바게 걔네 엠바 집어넣기 집에 부갈라서 통은 데려줘 데려침바다 가자랑 포르정이나 말에 차바에 깨라 팔아시던 게 원주 가자 랑모르게와는 팔아 차바기를 말아시던 게 원주 차단이게 밤에 미장에서 받으시번 돼서 테네송도 샤드도 순자게 능아를 내버렸어 카시네 나와게는 나하고 나주의 받은 내봐야 송소 카지를 망해다 로주주 받은 내봐야 대봐야 유에 대한 샤드다 당비체 마에 응아도 상사에는最新 앱 좀더 루이왕보다 나버셔봐 렌즈도 동해 미세번 용도 되니 매매버시 차와 대임 제이 고함 쇼티만 더 테네 샤드는 이벌 마양안에 이게 군도리 버시자 롱주는 알아지고 캄 넘버시 응은도 나오는 주데 테 눈노 버시자 대임네 쇼가 마르쳐 받아다 테네 샤드다 숨바라 마양안에 저가시자 롱주네 네텔라지비 캄시보다 신도 응은도 나오는 주데 테네 답답보다 시차와 대임네 자기 도망 심부 정마다 대신을 자데 샤드다 dim발라 마양안에 키버쳐 버시자 롱주데 기버저 제저 롱중데 나디 롱디 나라리베 라관니의 강반님 중으로제 디지 기부톱단데메 예 예라는天 기부 현식이 유배 달와 제념 동행중 대신을 자데 샤드자 쭉직벌 마행에네 부가 나와 시저 롱중의 나라 리베 부가 구분 중으로 규데 대세 마사로 좀 롱아즈비 동행이에 시험에 세만님이 장화되나 집을 결혼도 교와좀 동행이에 대해서 가서 시도 써도 교와라서 비게 동행께도 세 신도 마와스베就是长跑的自我的动员，谁牛的随便就是难过了，长跑的动员的差的双啊，冲跑前往的确的永远的只有的动员的，才就忙的这边是，才下个长跑的动员的，下顿的苏顿把人按你的写呗，没长的东西的，真没写没东西的，没那个东西的，再来东西的，要是叫你亲人东西叫你了。샤 dünya süzage bala mayangani medo düba şeşa lungjung lungding ala nebati gyurni kewe golos chopor chedo dize 자기 충고를 껴봐도 동해요 대달 뒤시 동해기 저 상사와다라도 사와다 비는 것이 저신 거 농문도 니수사기 긴데 리시께 마에 차라서베 당면이 깨지 표신 깨베 메르메 본네 송네 류빈 잡아 봐도 그 대달 양안 죽은 돌에 당번 매매 볼래 했네 샤이 주브르겨 주브르는 다들 지다다 보는 창 넘버 유는 고단야라 시계는 루번 류저 탐제 레기 줄에서 제 송소 제네 카토르도 다와 시작 롱중의 롱디 류된 고 토르도 돈 라바잔 친교원 줄 디스 짜기 주르민네 데바도 동해요 카지 아니도 아니도 신인 좋은 줄 카지 마다냠도 쉬는 줄야 대체네 살라라 동 뒤서 cir군도 교와서 동해요 침배 뒤서 치배 뒤서 바바슈니 지수는 데바서 동해요 대윤티 디시도 내데 나사 지중 대라 도면 메도 텐다 민바 나면나 텐다 장면서 텐다데 다다 지점 되바쳐 지인야 미장외 돈도 큐 샤숨디 카제라 샤숨디 넘버 세상 숨지기선은 수게 미누디 나지 동에 텔레 투어 대다량 로딩레 신도미세 증아지ren가 아랍도 더 미나티 벤도바이 나네 냐와도 비나도 대쇼네 류군군도 동에 첨을 내고 셰송소 텔라 이체는 렌징아도 줘봐요 수뉴냠도 사모
Birth is the root of all the other sufferings. There are 4 different types of birth. Most common is birth from a mother's womb, and the explanation will be according to this. The following sufferings occur in the intermediate state, before conception. Beings in the Bardo state possess miraculous powers. They walk in the sky, and with the vision of gods, they can see the place of their birth from far away. By the power of karma, 4 confusions develop. A storm arises, a huge rain falls, darkness descends, and a fearful sound emanates as if made by many people. When these appear, one will experience 10 erroneous perceptions, depending on positive or negative karma. One thinks that one enters a palace, one thinks that one ascends to the higher stories of a house, one thinks that one climbs on a throne, one thinks that one enters a grass hut, one thinks that one enters a house of leaves, one thinks that one enters a house of grass, one thinks that one enters a forest, one thinks that one enters a hole in the wall, one thinks that one enters a heap of straw. When in this way one perceives, according to their karma, their future father and mother copulating from far away and goes there. Those who have accumulated great merit to be reborn in a higher place see a palace or a house with several stories and and so forth, and go there. Those who have accumulated an average amount of merit and are to be reborn in a mediocre way see a grass hut and so forth, and go there. Those who have not accumulated merit and hold a lower rebirth will see a hole in the wall and so forth, and go there. When one arrives, if one is to be reborn a male, one develops an attachment for the father and for the mother, and an aversion for the father. If one is going to be reborn as a female, then one becomes attached to the father and feels aversion for the mother. With this attachment and aversion, one's consciousness is mixed with the secretions of the father and mother, and a child is said to be conceived. From then, the child remains in the womb for 38 weeks. Some stay 8, 9, or 10 months. Others are indefinite, and some even stay for 60 years. For the first week after a child is conceived, the embryo, the combination of the body, the organs, and the consciousness, experiences the inconceivable suffering of being cooked and fried in a hot kettle. At that time it is called an oval shape because it looks like a curd. During the second week, the all-touching wind arises from the mother's womb. When it touches the embryo, the four elements manifest. At that point it is called the oblong shape because it looks like a hard yogurt or butter. In the third week, the activating wind rises in the mother's womb. When that reaches the embryo, the four elements are more strongly manifested. At that time, it is called the lump because its shape is like an iron spoon or an ant's egg. Likewise, in the seventh week, clasping wind occurs in the wound. When the wind touches the embryo, the 2 arms and 2 legs appear. At that time, there is great suffering, as if a powerful person were pulling the limbs and another person were whipping it with a stick. Likewise, in the 11th week, the appearance of openings wind occurs in the mother's womb. When that wind touches the baby, the 9 openings appear. At that time, there is great suffering, as if a finger were probing a new open wound. There are still other sufferings. When the mother eats unbalanced food, such as something cold, the baby will experience the suffering of being thrown in ice water. Likewise, when the mother eats hot food or sour food and so forth, the baby will experience sufferings. If the mother eats a lot of food, the baby will experience the pain of being crushed between rocks. When the mother eats a little food, the baby will experience the suffering of being dangled in the sky. When the mother walks harshly or jumps or is beaten, then the baby experiences the suffering of rolling down a mountain. When the mother has frequent sexual activities, the baby experiences the suffering of being whipped by thorns. In the 37th week, it will become conscious of the womb's filth and stench, of darkness and imprisonment. It will feel so completely sad that it will wish to escape. In the 38th week, the flower-gathering wind will occur in the mother's womb. When that touches the baby, it shifts its position so that it faces the mouth of the womb. At that time, there is a great suffering, as if it were caught in an iron machine. Then, during the long period in the womb, the baby feels heat as if being cooked in a very hot vessel, and is touched by the 28 different winds. From being an oval shape until the completion of the whole body is developed by the essence of the mother's blood and so forth. Thus, the Entering the Womb Sutra says, first the oval shape will change into the fleshy oblong. From the fleshy oblong comes the lump shape, and the lump becomes hard. By changing the solid shape, the heads and 4 limbs appear. Then the bones will grow and complete the body. This is all caused by karma. After that, the facing downward wind will occur. When that touches the child, it will start to be born. Its 2 hands will stretch out. At that time, there is great suffering, as if being drawn into a net of iron wires. Some die in the womb. Sometimes the mother and baby die together. When a baby is born and falls on the ground, it experiences such suffering like being thrown on a heap of thorns. When it is washed, there is much suffering, like having its skin pulled off and then being scratched against a wall. Consider that long length of time, that kind of suffering and pain, and that kind of constriction, darkness, and filth. No matter how greedy a person is, if you asked him to stay covered in an unclean pit for 3 days in exchange for 3 ounces of gold, he would not agree. Yet the suffering in the womb is much worse than that. The letter of training says, inconceivable stench and filth, constriction and darkness. To enter the mother's womb is like a hell. One has to endure inconceivable suffering. So if one realizes this, how can one think of entering in the mother's womb even once?
가외 동에 받으면 너는 주탐바 대 수용수 요하다 짜용수 요하다 빠바용수 요하다 가도용수 요하다 도도용수 요하다 스지용수 요하다 소남용수 요하다 내매용수 요하다 세명용수 요하다 내감대 센죽도 요하다 수용수 요하다 아지 수창시 창 대나 창바된 균 우르부 쪽보 가로에 된 거만 로 짜용수 요는 아지 나승의 봉연도 얻어보던 줄 짝가로 찌들라서 봐로 빠바용수 요는 아지 빠바 살는 잠 유와르나서 차례했음 야에 나더더보던 줄네 톡라 꼬바 줄투다 녀메 풍부 성도 남아시는 요 카지 용수 카도 용수 교환은 아직 카도 짱당데 되면 매도 빼면 카체마 타 더부디 줄네 오호 짜 호부 매도 님버시는 저 투도 용수 교환은 아직 뉴바다 쪼스 줄는 저데 류지 시체베 갈래 가야면 심지 또냐베 자와가나 저완 충 원본은 유니버스 유민zem바 현도로 현도로 시지용 요한 알시행기 되지 그러거든 줄네 라웨 메베 예체치 되면 이민인도 미도 집에 딩무르 체베 부제 강된도 체어런 로 소나면서 요한 아기 런주데 사단담지 류기 전문민요케 신보민용 가제바도 강 메바데 선인도 선계의 등의 신도 cao 내메바 용수 요한 내치주 게네기 대비 내 시행탐지게 디탄 동에어 스명수 요한 메바데 제바 그 대마타도 제진 제바도 추는 요 유로 내감 대시 천죽도 우견자지 당하는 아번 중 뒤제 탐지 님비 치와라냐 대들의 바바 제스르바 게베소도 수는 미도지 게베스 스지 초지 투dom냐 게베 대와 초지 동행지 게베 치지 게베 당겨 초시 송소 제 송소
Briefly, there are 10 inconceivable sufferings of aging. One's body changes, one's hair changes, one's skin changes, one's complexion changes, one's abilities change, one's dignity changes, one's accumulation of merit changes, one's resistance to disease changes, one's mind changes, and the passage of time brings one closer to death. First, one's body changes means that once your body was stable, straight, and firm, and that it has changed to become crooked and dependent upon a walking stick. One's hair changes means that once your hair was shiny and black, and that it changes to gray hair or baldness and so forth. One's skin changes means that once your skin was soft and smooth like Varanasi silk or fine Chinese silk, and that it changes to become thick, rough, and wrinkled like a battered bangle. One's complexion changes means that once it was bright like a newly opened lotus flower, that it changes to become bluish and pale like a faded flower. One's abilities change means that once you had the capability and were eager to do anything, when that changes, strength is lost and you cannot undertake any effort. By losing the strength of mind, you lose interest in any activities. By losing the power of the senses, you can no longer protect objects well and make mistakes. One's dignity changes means that once people had praised and respected you, when that changes, people look down on you even if they are lower than you. Without reason, people dislike you. You are threatened by children. You embarrass your children and grandchildren. One's accumulation of merit changes means that all the wealth you have accumulated decreases. You cannot maintain body heat and cannot experience the taste of food. Even if you want to eat, you do not eat what you do not have. It is difficult to find someone who will provide it for you. One's resistance to disease changes means that you are stricken by the sickness of old age, which is the worst disease because it draws all the other sicknesses and you suffer. One's mind changes means that you immediately forget whatever you say and are senile. The passage of time brings you closer to death, means that breath becomes short and labored and that you're closer to death as all the compound forms deteriorated. Thus the Noble Profound Representation Sutra says, aging causes beauty to turn to ugliness. Age takes away dignity and ability. Old age robs away happiness and causes suffering. Old age causes death and takes away your complexion.
나의 동에 받으면 너는 뉴욕에 대한 수차별 답의 동에다 제 주무체의 동에다 맨 차와대의 동에다 서동인은 대보고 동에다 매병 어송의 동에다 요새세의 동에다 시도의 동에다 뭐도 대다라야 바바 자세를 발래 내게만도 내습 동에 로스의 미이다시 송소 치외 동에 받으면 개벌을 담에도 개버치면 대신 치다 세신그 수도 잡아다는 제 잡네 gwene bunye me negine dong khan kum shin gyur kala ne yob le ne min khachu da nab da jin da ngin ju kin lu la ko dang nga bon de membe ne formal ji thaman ani ne korwe gyun do ne nup shin ji min jik da u ju ne che kha da min 나는 당 직진 디네 돈 직진 퍼르든 로 깨침빈 딕 민버 첨부는 슈 양서 첨부는 롱 자주 첨부는 게 레기 롱인데 서숙 매비 초선 로 노르고샤 찬네 기후마 기후파 기후 부셰 네 세디 데즈 개버점 최마도 잡던 그런다 부인의 셈에도 셰 송소 누가다 제외 동네에 파마 부자라서 일을 잡아 시위스 양해의 동화의 명하다 운뷰를 동에 받으며 미도바다 제외 동네 다당에 예배 탑주기 동에 탑주에도 딕조라서 동에 망보여 동에 치만이네 콜라와 레밀 하이 동에 차 충비디 동 아제다 차도다 탑주기 동에 대들의 레민다는人신기 하이 벨라당지 이 동에 지체 송소 등감질하래 레미드 탑의 동에 네배 망고의 동에 빠공의 동에 제바든 잘와도 쇠바도 쭉바도 치포와도 동의 동에 용을 지게도 하이브 치와는 대나방한 중원을 교들 그 주마제는 요 메도가 중원 이버 친구니네 울 중원을 교 룰레 주망 증아와 중원을 교 랑게 때를 미가 유시해 송소 순간부터 수메기 감난 동에 대담에 왠게 치포와다 내라랑 하면지 냉행이 동해요. 대대 된로당 토리 되다가 레스바당에 손도 동아이노. 제가 코웨네들 동해 신비를 멤버로 캄버더브이데 인주근 돌이 꺄 깨마기후 스바 코웨 가선되는 바로 치라도 바 초도 바 신도 바로 초도 바로 임비 심진 가장 디 마좀 보면도 아랍동 바로 집에 매 관심 디다 되자다 시다 디무기 매다 깨와다 가와다 치위 매다 양해다 명아되면 이미되와다 추배 메다가라도 쓰진 바로 제베 가자면 텔레 타와 메듯이 셰송수 대들 거에 님이 되다 셰베 시베 대화를 로도바이는 대들이야 약세 제원 돌래 거에 님이 통하는 교회생이라도게 금순자는 집에는 쨘베심기 봉어지 제송수 로빈 루루기게 된 대들 송데 지게도 코와 텐들라베 남에다 냐와에도 된도 남다도 깨와 상보말라 깨와는 네버투 메뉴 라힌즈 제송수 담주 이신이 너무 타바름 게 거에 동에 때문에留的 nga바오
There are limitless sufferings of sickness, but briefly there are 7. The suffering of great pain, the suffering of harsh operations, the suffering of hot or bitter medication, the suffering of being stopped from eating and drinking what one likes, the suffering of pleasing doctors, suffering of decreasing wealth, and the suffering of the fear of death. The Noble Profound Representation Sutra says, tortured by the suffering of 100 diseases of contracting them is like being a hungry ghost during a human life. There are also limitless sufferings in death. The instructions to the King's Sutra says, Great King, like was when you are caught on the pointed stick of the Lord of Death, then you will be separated from arrogance, no refuge, no protector, no support, and tortured by sickness. Your mouth will be dry, your face will change, you will move your limbs, you cannot work, spittle, mucus, urine, and vomit will stick to your body, and your breathing will be short. You will be avoided by physicians and sleep in your last bed. The continuity of the samsaric life will stop. There will be great fright at the messengers of Yama, the Lord of Death. Your breath will stop, and your mouth and nose will fall open. You will leave this world behind and proceed to the next one, transmigrating completely from one place to another. You will enter into the great darkness and fall off a great precipice, be carried by the great ocean, chased by the karmic wind, and will go into an unknown direction. You cannot divide your wealth. When you cry, alas, mother, alas, father, alas, son, there is no refuge, no protector, no other support except Dharma, great king. Suffering of separation from loved ones means that when those to whom you are attached, parents, children, relatives, and so forth, die, there is limitless suffering and lamentation, mourning, crying, howling, and other expressions of sadness. The suffering of meeting with those who are not dear refers to those limitless sufferings of meeting with hated enemies, which results in fighting, quarreling, beating, and so forth. The last two sufferings are easy to understand. The demigod realm. The suffering of the demigods is similar to the suffering of the gods through the additional sufferings of arrogance, jealousy, and fighting. It is said, the demigods have mental suffering through jealousy of the glory of the gods. The God realm. The gods of the desire realm experience the suffering of fighting with the demigods, being dissatisfied with their pleasures, being humiliated, caught, slaughtered, dismembered, and banished. The transference of death and falling down to the lower realms. It is said, 5 signs of death appear when gods are close to death. Their clothes become stained with filth, their garlands of flowers fade, sweat comes from their 2 armpits, filthy odor arises from their bodies, and they dislike their own seats. The beings in the form and formless realms do not have this kind of suffering, but they suffer the transference of death and have no independent location, so they will experience the suffering of the lower realms. When the beings who have the pleasures of the higher states exhaust their karma, they fall into the lower realms. Therefore, the state of samsara is of the nature of great suffering, like a house of blazing fire. The Sutra of Entering the Womb says, alas, the ocean of samsara is ablaze, blazing, extremely blazing, supremely blazing, and supremely extreme blazing. Therefore, there is not one sentient being who is not tortured by it. What kind of fire is it that blazes so greatly? It is the fire of desire, aversion, and ignorance, the fire of birth, old age, and death. These blaze and burn constantly by the fire of suffering, lamentation, distress, and conflict. Therefore, no one is free from them. Thus, when one is aware of the faults of samsara, one will withdraw from the pleasures of samsara. The Sutra of the Meeting of the Father and Son says, one who sees the faults of samsara will develop a great sense of sadness. When one fears the prison of the three realms, one will make an effort to avoid them. The Acharya Nagarjuna also said it in this way, samsara is like this. There are no good rebirths among the gods, humans, hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals. Understand that birth is a vessel of many sufferings. This is the 5th chapter, dealing with the suffering of samsara from the jewel ornament of liberation, the wish-fulfilling jewel of the noble teachings. And so for this year, the teachings here, we'll leave the teachings here at the end of the 5th chapter of the Jewel Ornament.